with Patric Rogers, who is the creator of My Iron Lung. And I've just got a few questions for him here. Thanks for joining us, Paddy. And just wanted to ask you a first question. It's quite a haunting film, My Iron Lung. It's horrific in ways that you don't expect. It's passionate, striking. And I just wanted to start by asking, what were your main source of inspiration when you were creating the film?
I was on holiday in France, and I was spending a lot of I was in France in a van for the best part of the summer, and had a lot of time to just think, and without much distraction from kind of being on the internet really. And the main kind of thoughts were really kind of around how you can be kind of trapped within your own mind quite easily, and how thoughts can kind of take you to some strange places. And that was basically it really, and the idea that someone might as people, we kind of like armor ourselves to the outside world in some ways to kind of protect ourselves, and how that can kind of become quite unhealthy and kind of destructive in its own sense, and kind of protecting you from the outside world, but keeping you trapped within yourself, and how those thoughts kind of linger and become quite toxic. And I had this vision of like a black toxic poison that's inside people, and I think we kind of often describe stress and negative thoughts as being black, and kind of, but almost kind of like this oil that like kind of is inside you and needs, and eventually needs to escape, and will find a way, its own way out of your body. And that was basically kind of where it stemmed from. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating. I think it really comes across in the movie, like that sort of suffocating. It's so really sticks with you, in my opinion. But yeah, well, for me, a big part of what makes the film so effective, and this sort of haunting quality you sort of come about with, is the actual sound design throughout the movie. I think it's throughout, it's sort of like a haunting wind mixed with minor keys on a piano. Is the sound design actually an important factor when it comes to creating not just My Iron Lung, but all your films?
I think so. I think sound is everything in film. Absolutely everything. And it's more I found when I was thinking about the film, it's very hard to kind of write dialogue, and even though I kind of recorded dialogue in the actual in the production, and it just didn't come across when when I was playing in the editing, of like kind of like, this person's inside this helmet, he's switched off from the outside world in some ways, and so that everything, like the outside world, is almost kind of lost in translation. So the only kind of things he's left with is sounds that kind of echoing through the helmet really, and through through his mind. The music is such a key part of film, in the sense that it creates the tone, and what kind of I'm really interested in silent film, and certainly kind of very inspired by old film from the German expressionist stuff, and just how kind of how can you tell a story with very, very little dialogue, and try and emphasize that with just sound and music really. It was very challenging, actually. It was quite, I suppose, I did quite a lot of the work on the film on my own, and I've played in bands and stuff in the past, and a musician, but hadn't done any kind of music for quite a long time really. So it was quite freeing and quite a nice opportunity to kind of just play around and do something creative and new for myself.
And it really brings the horror of the film across for me and the emotional quality. And I think, you know, the film without sound, it's like you were saying, it just wouldn't have been the same thing at all. I think it's a big factor. Yeah. But thank
I'm
you for that.
glad you like it as a horror. That's the kind of you know, horror is my absolute kind of passion about cinema, and it's such a key marker of society, and so many kind of concepts are explored with horror, and this film I was kind of trying to, you know, to me it's absolutely horrific, and the idea that, you know, I think that's probably the most scary thing I could think of, is being trapped and having been through experiences, periods of kind of stress and anxiety and you know, difficult times in my life, and I'm sure people have the same. It's the most frightening thing that can possibly ever happen to you, and far more than what kind of a serial killer running around in the woods might be able to create, really.
Yeah,
So,
it's funny. It's very different from your like mainstream typical horror film in that way, but it brings across horrific themes in such a different, visceral way. Well, that's just what I like about it, you know, personally. It's not what I think I was expecting when I was looking at the submissions for the festival, but very unique in that way. Just touching on the themes here, I wanted to ask, well, clearly horror is a big aspect of the film, but it's also coupled with lots of other themes, romance, isolation, societal fears. Uh, did everything in every theme in the film come out in the way you intended when you were creating it, or did it all just sort of come together in the creation process?
I think it definitely came together in the final processes. Really, I had lots of very clear, when I was kind of in the initial stages of putting the film together, I had very clear kind of beats that I kind of wanted to hit with the story. I didn't really have an idea of kind of length, and like I said, I kind of planned dialogue and all kinds of stuff like that. But when but it was kind of kind of still frames that were kind of more key to what I was trying to kind of create, almost kind of tableaus, in the sense that like it's just a still image, and how can you, if you were to just pause the film for a second, or it was just a series of still images, how would you, as an audience, as a viewer, be able to interpret? Would you be able to interpret what's happening in the scene? So the opening shot is the guy sitting in an armchair in this crazy cobbled together outfit, watching TV, which is a fairly kind of mundane kind of just normal thing, really. So that's why I was trying to create kind of striking visuals that will be able to portray this story of what this guy's going through. But I think by the end, certainly in the editing process, it was definitely kind of organically kind of came together and evolved into what it was. And certainly kind of some of the, I think that's probably one of the most exciting. You hear a lot about filmmakers who talk about like the editing processes, where that kind of it comes together, and the actual kind of the artistic element of making film kind of comes out. And it's, you know, it seems to be very, very true, actually, having that opportunity to kind of just play with your idea and challenge yourself, and, you know, cut it, and how can you make this scene work in such a, with limitations, you know, with the limitations. So certainly in a short film, how the limitations can kind of work for you, and kind of also challenge you to the point where you have to kind of separate yourself away from the concept a little bit to kind of, in order for it to kind of evolve. But there's certainly the you know, kind of the main kind of example, I think, really is when the guy's watching the TV and he's seeing the kind of like a woodland clearing is the idea. That my mind, it was kind of, there's this clearing that this guy's walking through this forest or you know, this dense dark wood in his mind, and you know, that's all kinds of like things to evoke in someone's mind. Being in the dark wood, it's quite a frightening place, but then this kind of walking out into this clearing, from that woodland and coming into an open field. So I filmed the actual kind of the opening. I filmed it kind of over a couple of weeks, really. It was more kind of maybe 2 or 3 weeks of kind of filming various parts of the film. But kind of the lighting was, it was like, how is it going to work? Is it going to work? Because he needs to kind of like, he needs to enter this scene, and so I filmed what he's watching on TV. I filmed that like right at the beginning, a few weeks into right at the beginning, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, I had the guy in the suit, and we had to go back to the location and try and kind of match it up and line it up. And in your head, just like when you're filming, you're like, oh god, is this gonna work, and is this gonna translate? And then you get to the editing suite, and it really came together in a really nice way. Like, it's just kind of the timing of how he's kind of we're kind of ghosting those images together of him being like arms like hugging his girlfriend, and then she's separating herself away from him, and it kind of just timed really nicely when we cut it into the editing. It just really seemed so like, I was like, wow, actually that seems okay. I came out all right that bit.
It all kind of came together at once. I love that.
Yeah.
I suppose that's what a lot of filmmaking is. Just you're not sure, and then it just happens, and it's perfect. But,
yeah.
There you go. Well, I wanted to actually ask about the diving suit a little bit. I just want to say the film's ingenious in the way it's able to represent someone, sort of shutting themselves off from this suffocating world by placing themselves in this iron diving suit. And I wanted to know if it was just difficult to acquire such a unique prop for your film, or what was the process there?
I'll show you. It was not difficult to acquire at all. It's just like casually above here, and it weighs absolutely nothing.
Oh, there it is.
Just like the foam, so it's pretty.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, it's just no, it's just made of foam.
Yeah, I thought it was an actual diving helmet.
Well, I'm so glad that you thought that, because that was one of the most anxiety-inducing parts of the entire thing. It's like, this looks like it's made of foam.
It looks so good. Like, no, you pulled it off. How did you create? Was it you that created it, or did you purchase it? Or?
Created the helmet kind of right a long time ago. Actually, the helmet's been kind of sat in my office for some time, with the kind of the idea that this is going to be used at some point. And then the rest of the suit, though, kind of like, I had the vision of the diver's helmet. Initially, it was kind of like a space helmet, and I don't know, it's very difficult to kind of fabricate a dome. It's like, it's not going to work. I just don't have the finances in order to kind of create that. So the diver's helmet kind of came together, and it's kind of iconic, really. And it's such a it's a beautiful object, actually. If to see one in person, they're beautiful when you actually kind of get close to them.
You were talking about silent film and German expressionism before. It sort of ties back to those themes in a way by bringing such a striking older prop into the film.
Yeah,
it does get that across.
That's kind of, what more simple way of kind of demonstrating like someone being shut off from their environment to be encased in iron at the bottom of the ocean. Really, that's what they were there for, to stop you from dying at the bottom of the sea. So what kind of like, in some ways I think it really worked, and in some ways I think it kind of like it kind of maybe almost some ways it might have looked a little bit cheap in the film, but kind of what I wanted to do is, this guy has built this suit over a long time. The idea is that like it's grown organically with him. So he's kind of like, if you just look, he's got cricket pads on his legs, like, okay, well, cricket pads. But the idea is that this guy's he's cobbled this together over his life, and it's until it's now this monstrous suit that, like, he can't even wipe his arse. He's sat on the toilet, and he's like, what do I do? Like, that kind of like, that's the idea. It was like, how do we get this across? This guy is just so dominated by this thing that he's created.
It does have a DIY quality to it, and that's how I was interpreting it as well when watching it. Like, it was like, he's sort of like, he's sort of like made the suit himself to get away from all of this, well, the societal pressures, I suppose. But
yeah, and I think that's what, you know, that's what we do. We cobble together parts of, you know, we armor ourselves. That's what our clothes are as humans, aren't we? You know, we wear different things to show different emotions or to express something certain, it's expressed in different ways. But
it's the embodiment of like a suit of armor. It's protecting yourself, like, in a way. Yeah,
yeah,
it comes
yeah.
across really well. But yeah. Well, I've got one final question here, which is about. You were touching on the cinematography a bit before, actually, when you were mentioning the importance of the still image. I just want to ask a bit more about it. I think the cinematography here is key to the brilliance of the film, and I think it's emphasized by you deciding to use black and white opposed to color. And I just wanted to ask you why you decided to shoot in black and white opposed to color for My Iron Lung. That's all.
Aesthetically, basically, you know, I just love black and white film. I love black and white photography, like noir cinema, that kind of things. I like the idea of that. I really like the idea of playing with contrast, and that kind of, it kind of helps as well in some ways as someone kind of the blacks kind of. I've really tried to kind of emphasize the black elements within the film, and that kind of the darker scenes seem quite dark but really contrasted when you've got kind of the lighter elements within the shot, to kind of try and emphasize that kind of hiddenness and that kind of being in the shadows. And some parts, you know, there's a tracking shot where he walks out from the kitchen into down the corridor, and it almost for a second he's almost lost in that darkness, and the same so that was kind of the idea. It was more of an aesthetic thing, really, and it kind of it almost kind of feels a little bit kind of cliche, I think, because when you're kind of making a short film, so stick it in black and white, I know it automatically gives it kind of an element of like pretentiousness or, you know, something, but I think it was really important to the film. It wasn't kind of just
it always grabs my attention when a submission, you know, is in black and white. I just think it makes the shadows in the film so striking, especially for a horror film. And it's like you say, everything becomes sort of suddenly sharper. And I agree with you. I love black and white. It's one of my favorite ways.
Yeah.
I'm not
and horror, so sorry. I mean, you know, horror is so tied to kind of it's so tied to color, in the sense that, you know, there's you know, blood and things like that, especially kind of modern horror is so kind of, it's almost kind of comic book in its kind of color and palette. Whereas black and white, you can't get away with anything in black and white. I think you have to kind of it's a very, you know, now it's a choice. It's an artistic choice, isn't it, to make something in black and white. But it forces you to be I feel like it forces you to be thinking differently. Obviously, you're as a, you know, as an artist, you're kind of looking at the world through color, and when you're looking through the lens, it's in color as well. It's when you but you're thinking with a black and white mind, which is quite it's quite an interesting place to be, and quite you know, an interesting way of thinking, is that how's this going to project when we're looking at when we change it into black and white, and then how the kind of the shadow is going to play and contrast and stuff like that. So it's just nice, and I just love black and white. It looks great, doesn't it? You know,
it looks so fantastic.
Like always in black and white, and it's the greatest horror film that's ever been made. So
I agree. Most of the greatest films ever created are just black and white, and you can tell why. It's just, and it's like you were saying about noir films before. I think the way they're able to play with shadows and that chiaroscuro, it's just there's nothing better for me personally.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Like it instantly there is an artistic. Actually, that's not necessarily true. I suppose if you look at there's lots of black and white cinema in the past where there isn't that kind of element of kind of, it can be quite flat, the image sometimes as well, but obviously it's dependent on the director and the director's vision, but it just looks great, doesn't it? Shadow, contrast, it just sets a tone.
I'm a sucker for it. Any film black and white, I'm like, well, how can we get this in? You know, like
Think about Frankenstein, that original Frankenstein movie, and like just look at that. What they did in with the set and you know, we kind of in our head, everyone kind of knows Frankenstein is green, but like never ever see him in green.
He's black and white in those early films. You know, it's only in the late Hammer horror films from the 50s he changes to green. You know?
Maybe it's just a kind of like humans were in, I don't know what it is, we're able to perceive those types of things through the images. It's just
it's fantastic. And I think Boris Karloff in that film, he's fantastic. And I think the fact that back in the 30s, they didn't have the technology to even, they had to become more inventive in a way with their techniques and filmmaking styles. And that's why those films are so good. And they still stand the test of time, if you will.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that's every question. Thank you so much for talking to me, Patric. I can't wait to see. Are you coming up with anything next? Any new films under the pipeline? Or
yeah, I think so. There's a few ideas kind of been slowly boiling away. It's always down at the moment. You know, nothing. You can't do anything at the moment. Can we? So, and it kind of. I was very. I was last September. I was ready to film again, and then we had a problem with the location, and then the Victoria who was in the film, she was going away for a bit, so we kind of put it back, and then COVID happened, and then we didn't get.
Everything gets pushed back, sort of thing.
Yeah, but if it's happening for Hollywood, it's happening for me in my office. It'll work itself out, won't it?
Where can people follow you if they want to keep a track of your filmmaking? Got anywhere you post?
Yeah, if you want to find me on Instagram, it's Patch PATCH _1138. And I also have it's kind of another kind of like film thing that's been kind of slowly kind of bubbling away. Very, very few followers, I must say, but it's still a project that's kind of happening. So it's called Before You Adore. So it's before _you _ door. So I think that's it. So I'll send you the link, but that's another kind of more of an animation.
I'm a sucker for animation as well. Like, you know,
yeah,
I'd be interested to see it. Yeah,
I'll send you a link, but that's more kind of, again, that's like black and white, playing with sound and simple animation.
That's what I love to hear. Well, thank you again for talking to us, and thank you for submitting your brilliant film, My Iron Lung, to the BIFF Festival. And I hope this won't be the last time we get to chat. If I get to speak to you soon as well.
All right, cheers, Ben. Thank you.
Nice one, Patrick. I'll see you.
Okay, mate. Take care. Bye.